Welcome to my presentation, Collaborative Strategies in Assessment. My name is Rick Ross, and I'm a first-year principal at Hamilton Middle School, affectionately coined the Middle. My building has an enrollment of 152 students. I have 6th graders numbering 46, 47 7th graders, and 59 8th graders. I've got 12 classroom teachers that includes music and band shared between 3 buildings. I've got 2 paras, a fabulous secretary, a school nurse, a counselor, a brand new licensed clinical social worker, and a librarian. My 6th grade team is approximately 3.5 teachers. We have to share one, and I have singletons that teach 7th and 8th grade core classes. My goal is to invest in the growth of our middle school staff to foster a process that will guide us through measures of analyzing student data on benchmark formative assessments. The end result, I hope, will be improved instruction focused on the standards, which in turn will improve student performance as measured towards the standards. The first step in benchmarking our performance was a collaboration with the principals of the 7 other middle schools in the KCI conference. If I want to compare myself, I'm going to start with the conference. Let's just face it, everybody's competitive. The conference schools are Hamilton, Lawson, Lathrop, East Buchanan, Mid Buchanan, North Platte, West Platte, and the Plattsburgh school districts. It's visually apparent that we do not compare very well to any of the other conference schools. At the time of this survey, Lathrop has still not shared their scores. I remain optimistic that perhaps their performance was lower than ours. I jest somewhat, but they went to a 4-day school week, and preliminary reports are that their test scores have suffered somewhat. My MLDS mentor is the middle school principal in East Buck, and their district almost mirrors ours in size, and they run on the block system. This made it a very suitable comparison to our own performance. Mid-Buck is another district that is similar in size, and they use a unique schedule. This graphic shows the percentage of scores that were advanced or proficient, and as you can see, we are below 40% on all areas, whereas our conference schools competition, most of them are at least 50% of their scores are over that, and many of them are up in the 60% of proficient and advanced, and this is just unacceptable performance. The next comparison was naturally versus the state standards, and half of those scores were above the 40th percentile as well. So even on the state average, our conference does very well. In fact, better than the state average in most areas. Unfortunately, our district did not compare in either the conference or the state standards. We've identified our weakness, so it's time to administer an assessment improvement inventory. I did that with all of our middle school teachers and selected our core specifically. The results of that assessment follow. The first one we needed to improve on was maintaining alternative ways for students to demonstrate competency and reflect on their learning and using technology. The second was we needed to be able to write assessment items that reflect the language of the Missouri MAP released items. So when they saw test items, it was not the first time they'd seen a question in that style. The third and final that we needed to improve on was engaging in a collaborative classroom curricular or building data analysis process. We needed to come together as a building and work together on the goal of improving our performance on state assessments. After my surveys and conversations, I've come to the conclusions that there's approximately 5 specific factors that I believe contribute to our overall test performance. Scheduling remediation and enrichment is one. The second is scheduling collaboration time, cross-curricular plan and grade level planning time. The third is we need to have a building goal that's specific to formative assessment. Right now we don't have such. Number 4, we need to provide professional development in test writing. We need to understand the process of writing our own formative assessments. And lastly, we need to incorporate our building goal into the teacher evaluation process. Right now, that hasn't been done very effectively, I don't feel. So that's something we can improve on. The first area of improvement that I predict will result in a quantitative measure of improvement is scheduling remediation and enrichment. Currently, we have not been doing a good job of identifying struggling learners and taking proactive steps to remediate. Likewise, we do not offer much in the form of enrichment. Two districts in our conference, East Buchanan and Mid Buchanan, have this built into their schedule. I've kind of robbed some of their concepts. The school schedule seems to me to be as important to the assessment and PLC concept as anything. If we do not have a schedule that affects collaboration and appropriate common and cross-curricular planning opportunities, it would be very difficult to measure any improvement in our culture or assessment practices. For this reason, my benchmarking begins with implementing some minor changes to our schedule. The second commitment that I see as necessary is the common planning time for cross-curricular teams. We already maintain pretty good common grade level planning time, but I believe that with so many singleton teachers we can gain some instructional and assessment opportunities if, for example, our social studies and ELA teachers work together and our math and science teachers collaborate to work across the curriculum. To create this time and affect positive cultural influence, I plan on implementing a one-day-a-week morning assembly. The result will be 1 hour per week at the expense of 30 minutes of instructional time per day that we can meet in these cross-curricular groups to collaborate on assessment. I firmly believe the changes I'm looking to implement will give us time to analyze student data and individual student progress towards specific learning standards and allow us to make real-time adjustments to instruction. It's also going to give us time to analyze curriculum and assessments vertically and on a cross-curricular level. We're going to be able to differentiate instruction in real time before struggling learners lose motivation to improve. And hopefully teachers can grow within their craft and master research-based instructional strategies. I have an outstanding counselor that was able to move our core and exploratory classes around and split some blocks into two 45-minute sessions to expand our exploratory offerings. I believe this is going to have a positive effect on culture, instruction, and assessment. And so back to the assessment-specific needs identified in my inventory. I'm reaching out to our curriculum director to collaborate on some specific test writing practices that reflect the state-released items, as well as revisit the formative assessment practices we already have in place. We've called ourselves a PLC, and we've always stressed the importance of quality formative assessment. But we need to discontinue giving it lip service. We need to put it into application. We need to create a performance assessment for staff in regards to assessment and hold them accountable as well as ourselves. As far as the timeline and potential with my plan, sharing data and practice with my KCI peers has provided me some means to envision a 3-year plan to improve our test scores. The reality is that the practices I intend to implement will be practiced on the outgoing population of my building, the 8th graders, and implemented fully on the population entering my building next year. There's absolutely no time to waste in this process. However, all things must be carefully planned. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my presentation.